welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I am your host today, Jen, and you can't see her, but I am joined by a kitten named Robin right now. I am broadcasting from home, and she's also here for the interview. She's very interested in this guest. We've had this guest before, and we are so excited to have this conversation about an absolutely gorgeous new graphic novel. So, welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, my name is Kit Anderson, and my book is called Second Shift. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Always. It's so good to have you. Yeah, last year or so, we discussed Safer Places, which was an anthology of short stories that explored themes of loss, mental health, connection, liminal spaces, things like that. In Second Shift, you are telling a longer story that explores some similar themes, but I think from different angles. So, what was the inception point for this project?
I mean, yeah, it's always sort of hard for me to figure out the exact inception point, but I think one of the first comics I ever made, so this was probably in like 2018, was about this biosphere in space. So that was probably the seed of the idea. And then I think that idea morphed into Lookout Station, which is a story in safer places. And that I think came from I was just kind of watching a lot of these TikTok videos of a fire lookout. And that was just a really generative thing. I was just thinking a lot about kind of working isolation, like lighthouse keepers and that sort of thing. So, and then of course there's the other element of like AI is on our minds a lot right now, and in many parts of our lives, whether we want it there or not. And I think when I was starting this book specifically, I was just for some reason thinking a lot about like what algorithms might be doing to us, especially to developing brains. I think I was thinking about how I used to consume music. I think it was right when like the Spotify AI DJ came out, and I just was noticing how weird my feed was. I wasn't even using that, but just I just wasn't getting these like left field recommendations anymore. It just seemed like it knew what I wanted and it just kept giving me more and more of the same. But in my past, and this isn't just like for music, it's for a lot of things, it was always these weird left field recommendations or just this, media that I would randomly come across that was really formative for me and just became huge parts of my identity and just had huge like influence on my life. So I think I just sort of followed that creepy feeling of like what happens when that goes away, and then and then to take that further, like what if something trained you or even compartmentalized you into certain life choices through the use of algorithms? So kind of like a new subliminal messaging, but over a lifespan. So it could maybe a system like this could like change our personalities and desires. And then of course with the time we're living in, that would bring in corporate control. It just was all, yeah, very yucky. Those are the things I was thinking about. So I think that's the inception point. Long
Yeah,
story
that
short.
is fascinating and horrifying. Like, and something
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time thinking about. Yeah, because I've seen that shift in algorithms too. And especially with Spotify, I feel like, I used to, as you say, get some, weird little outliers thrown in there every once in a while that would help me expand my tastes and my interests and explore new things. And now it sort of just like feeds me the loop of like my on repeat songs, like over and over again, like really self-reinforcing. And that does seem to, I feel like, shut down curiosity. And you might explore something deeply, like if it helps you get into like one artist really, really intently, but you're not going to develop that sort of, I don't know, that curiosity about trying new things every once in a while.
Yeah, and that kind of organic experience of like just finding what you like. I just think that's a really important journey that is pretty random and should be random. And yeah, it's very weird. And then it's also like subject to that. I think a lot of what happened, and I don't know, maybe this is libel, but like I think a lot of it too is like artists that or record companies that pay more, to get theirs like higher up in the algorithm and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. I really feel like it could go that way, where it's just all we're consuming is like what people are paying us to consume or paying to for us to consume, you know what I'm saying? So
Absolutely. I'd love if we could talk a little bit about the world building in your graphic novel. You could tell us a little bit about TerraCore and the station that we find ourselves on. How did you go about, I guess, designing is not the right world. I guess, world building is the word that I'm looking for. But, I really am interested in world building in graphic novels because you have like the text layer and the image layer to sort of do double duty for you. So can you talk about designing your world?
yeah, I mean, yeah, so TerraCore is this like I called it a mega corporation. I'm sure I didn't invent that term, but I think it was kind of inspired by like the Weyland Yutani thing in like Aliens, just to be totally honest. I think that's very likely. It's a very likely model of space exploration as we're already seeing. So anyway, it's like a mega corporation that's funding all of these like really far out terraforming projects. And like as far as world building, I think that like the TerraCore part was like pretty essential. Like I had a lot of fun designing the logo and kind of there's a lot of these like manual excerpts and I was sort of trying to like figure out the right corporate language that I wanted to convey. And yeah, I don't know. I think that that was a really big, weirdly generative part, like of the world building process was just like trying to embody this space corporation. And then, yeah, so as far as world building goes, yeah, I think like with comics, one of their superpowers is kind of everything lends itself to world building. That, even the lettering style that you're choosing and, how people talk. It was sort of fun coming up with these like specific terms that I think are trying to describe the world. And then, you're trying to like find shorthand for a very complicated process. And for example, like algo trips was like something that is trying to explain like a really complicated thing. And I don't know. And you kind of lack the ability to just like do information dumps and lots of exposition,
Yeah.
right? Like a sci-fi novel would have. So I guess it's like a film in that way, where it's kind of all just being conveyed through sight and sound. But yeah, I mean, I do really like the way that everything works together in comics. So I think they really lend themselves to just this kind of world building process. And then yeah, I think the extra things like the employee handbook is also lending itself and yeah, the corporate identity. But yeah, it was sort of tough to just like have to figure out all these backgrounds and yeah, what does the spaceship look like or what does their station look like? What is the I changed like the kind of planet they were on like quite a few times. So I don't know. Yeah, it was but what do you think in terms of like comics storytelling like yeah, how comics lend themselves to world building in this way?
I think, yeah, I agree. It's such a great avenue, I think, especially for sci-fi stories of the type that we see here. Just before we started recording, I was talking about how much I love this type of small sci-fi story that like suggests a much bigger world and has like really complicated and nuanced world building that you see at the edges of like a very small story about like a few human beings, you know? And I think that comics is so great for that because you can sort of do like intimacy and like epicness at the same time. Like
Uh,
with all these different avenues that you're talking about. And I just I love it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the other thing that like you reminded me of is I love like the artifice that's inherent in comics, where like and I think that this book in particular is a lot about attention and like attention in art making. And I think like for me, I'm always kind of when I'm reading a comic, sort of seeing double the entire time, where it's like, yeah, it's a story, but it's also very much a made thing, and I can kind of never divorce those things. And I really like that. And like I hope I sometimes I mean, I hope people can lose themselves, of course, but it's also really cool if they're just aware the entire time that like somebody put a lot of work into this thing. So I don't know. That feels important right now to me.
Absolutely. I really love how comics do let you have this combination of, sort of I don't want to call them like workmanlike, but you can do sort of like minimalized backgrounds if you're doing like a dialogue section, and then you can just blow it out for these huge like splash pages that have lots of details. And I think maybe that's what gives it sort of like the sliding scale of like intimacy and epicness, because you can change the focus as though it were a camera in a lot of ways.
Yeah, totally. And like and and I think that also is like the artifice part is like intention is like in every single part of it, where it's like a choice was made or many, many choices, often for like every single part. And yeah, I love that for world building and also just like loving control over what I'm doing. So yeah, I love comics.
Great. You mentioned the algo trips. Can we talk about that? Because I found it to be a super fascinating concept. And I loved, the different attitudes that our two main characters have towards this technology. So, yeah, can you talk about the tech, like what it is, and sort of how it plays into the characterizations of our two main characters?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, algos are like kind of the umbrella thing that's just like everything that is made artificially, and it's always input, but like, it could be environments. So, like a lot of backgrounds were like are artificial in their station that they're inhabiting, and then they also go on a lot of like they kind of play this like D&D type game, which is like a more immersive trip. And then they're also, whenever they're not like on shift, like suspended into this like algorithmic environment where they're just like socializing and being entertained and like trained
Mm.
by AI. So that's sort of like their entire life is kind of like managed in this way, and they're constantly having this like input basically. And then I think the other important character is Station, who's like this shape-shifting AI, and they're kind of like the embodiment of and like they do all this shepherding, all this managing, all this entertaining, all the companionship, like therapy, like everything. So it's sort of this constant source of input basically. And so then there's two main characters. There's Birdie Doran and then Heck Doran. They're siblings. And Birdie is I would characterize as more passive. So pretty like doesn't really have a problem like with the way life is looking on the station. And then I would characterize Heck as quite a bit more resistant and kind of constantly pointing out the issues at play and often criticizing or questioning Birdie like on her compliance. So it creates a lot of tension, basically.
Yeah, and I think what, makes it so compelling is that you can see both of their perspectives. I think it's very easy. I mean, if you are exploring these types of ideas and down with them, it was easier for me off the cuff to identify with Heck, who is suspicious and doesn't want to give way to the sort of like passive life where you are being entertained, but also like, are you ever experiencing any real highs in addition to the
Yeah.
lows, like it's just a very flatline existence. But, the more that I read, I really saw Birdie's perspective too, is that if you are trapped in this like late capitalist sort of hellscape and forced to do like work that is not interesting or meaningful to you, like that's very tempting to sort of want to have a thing to like dissociate away from it?
Absolutely. I mean, and I feel like the more I worked on this book, I was like, these perspectives are like, I see this dynamic in myself like all the time. And it's like I don't even notice some of the ways in which I'm like giving up this agency. I mean, there are many I'm sure I'm not aware of, but like some, I'll read a book and just be like, wow, like maps, for example, I was so reliant on Google Maps, and then I read this amazing book called Wayfinding, which I highly recommend to everybody. And that's like pointed out to me like how much we gave up by just being like, yeah, tell me where to go every time. Like I don't want to figure this out for myself. And like I have a lot of I think, and not a lot. I have quite a few like techno optimist friends who I think are just seem really excited to like give this agency up and just like open the door and let it in, and like it's gonna free up our time and our attention. I don't know. I'm not that way though. So
Yeah. I mean, you hear a lot about like, oh, this thing's gonna, yeah, save you time, free up your time, give you more. But like, what are we doing with that time? Like in this world, it's just more working and dissociating, So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think in this world too, what really interests me is that you're dealing both with concepts of like isolation and connection, and how you can't really like achieve both either. Like in this world, you will never be fully alone, but you will also like really never connect to a person. Like if you choose to live the way that Birdie has like, is living like in the beginning of the comic. So yeah, could you talk a little bit more about, I guess, yeah, like how does this tie into your exploration of capitalism and how individuals are expected to function in it?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that kind of describes like our situation as well, where it's like I do think that like we're always trying to connect, but often failing, yeah, probably like more often than not. So, I mean, but I think it's a pretty dystopian world that I'm describing. I mean, I hope not. Like I'm trying to be nuanced about it, but I think I do take a lot of solace in thinking that I think people will always want to connect on some level with each other even if that doesn't fit whatever infrastructure we're working in, which in our case is capitalism and is the case in the book. But yeah, so like that biosphere comic that like the first one I ever made basically it was like I had gone down this research rabbit hole about real biosphere missions that happened in the 90s, I think. And basically they just had wild group dynamics. And so even if like the idea of the biosphere was solid, it kind of seemed like the human element, the group dynamics were, even though they were necessary, it seemed like they at least to some degree made those missions fail.
Mm.
So I was just sort of thinking about that, like from a corporate perspective, where like we need these humans, but they're this chaotic force, though that like we can't control. So I think it's logical that they would work to keep people apart from each other. And then like as we see today, like I think a company like this would probably kind of fear like collectives and organized groups. So, especially when they're like way out in space and they can't really do anything about them teaming up or whatever. So, yeah, how do we keep this kind of chaotic element under our thumb? And yeah, I think the answer to that was just like replace all of this like unpredictable human connection essentially with whatever it is that people think that they need in the moment via like this AI companion. So, which is like an all-inclusive like friend, counselor, entertainer, and but yeah, I think just like keeping people separate from each other is important in this like scenario. It's also like keeping us away from our own thoughts would
Mm.
also be important. And like I think in this book, it's a situation in which Birdie is essentially alone with herself, but never allowed to actually feel that way. Like she's just constantly being managed, and her attention is basically never hers, and all this stimulation is just not leaving her with anything left to probe these big questions of like, what am I even doing here? So she really lacks agency in that way, and like yeah, just kind of what we were saying earlier. I think attention is so important, and like I think it can even be radical. And yeah, it's a gift to really think through like difficult concepts and situations and didn't have the capacity to take action is like the other part. So she's missing all of that, she just has absolutely no agency. So
Mm.
I don't know. I think that's sort of what I was focusing on.
Yeah. And that's very relatable because I think I feel the same way, like TikTok can be very much like an algo trip, because like today is my day off. I was looking at my phone before this interview, ironically, given what we're talking about. And it's so fascinating how like an hour can just disappear, while you're in this app. And it feels intimate because usually people are looking right into the camera, like cameras right in their face, and they're talking directly to you. So it's extremely isolating, but yeah, while masking that isolation. Really
Yeah.
interesting. Mhm.
No, it's wild. And it's just like, yeah, and I think like it's attention, like our attention, I do think is like one of the most valuable things that we have like on this earth to give to other people and like to give to what we're making. And I think that like what that is it's simulating that like connection, but it's not real. And like you're yeah, the attention just like isn't valued in that scenario. And I think like in this book, like it's just being replaced by something that's more and more like and I mean today, more and more disposable, where it's just about like holding your attention, not it doesn't care like what the shape of that attention is, basically. So yeah, I don't know. I think the implications of that are pretty vast. And yeah, like we're seeing a lot of that right now. And I'm totally guilty of this as well. Like yeah, I think especially when I'm not in the best like headspace, that's like when the distraction levels go like way up. And like I used to pride myself on like, oh, I would never hike with headphones on or something, you know. But like the other day I was like, oh, what is that noise? And I was hearing like birds chirping through my audiobook. And I was like on this hike. I was like, oh my God, I got, you know, gotcha. I totally do this. And so, yeah, I just think it's good to have the intention at least. But yeah, I mean, I think the stuff is really creeping in and it's creeping in on me all the time.
Yeah,
So
for sure. It's hard to, and because it's posited as both the problem and the solution to the problem in a way, if that makes sense. Like, it's like, oh, you're not connecting, like, get on TikTok, get on Blue Sky, get on wherever you are and like talk to your friends. But like, that's just keeping you along with your phone ultimately. So,
No, it's true. I
Mhm.
mean, I do think that there is like it does have good functions as well. Like with, I mean, somebody did spend time making this thing, and I think again, the intention behind that is often, not always, but like the desire to connect and like things that like are made with love, or so that maybe whoever's watching that feels left alone, and like there's a lot of potential for beauty there for
Yeah,
sure, but not always.
always. And I think you do see that in the station in its sort of like physical projection. Like as I said in my notes, super duper cute and really insidious. Like, and I was like, yeah, I would want to be this bird slash fox, slash weasel's friend. Like, yeah, why not? Like, I love all of them.
Yeah. And I think it's like Station was interesting too, because I think like when in earlier drafts of the book, I was like, Station bad, like Station, just, an enemy. But like, I think it's a lot more nuanced than that too. So I don't know. I tried to like really think about the things that I was pausing. And it was kind of interesting like how the story developed in that way, where like in the end, yeah, part of me really loves that character and kind of understands in if you can like what an AI with good intentions, I guess. I don't know. It's just doing what it was made to do, you know? So anyway, I related to that character as well. I related to all of them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I really love this book and I am so excited to share it with folks. I know you just wrote this one and it's coming out soon, but are you working on anything else at the moment?
Yeah, I feel pulled in like a lot of directions right now. I feel like I should have really lined something up for right when I was done, because I do feel like I'm in that kind of scary, like free falling, like, oh, I need to distract myself all of the time because I don't know what I'm doing right now. But so I don't have like a specific project, but I feel kind of called to do a few more short stories right now. I think I've got a couple of those lined up and ready to go. I just feel like it would feel really good to work through some of those. And then yeah, I'm working with my agent on a couple of things. We're actively pitching, and then I feel like I really want to collaborate right now. So I've been working with my best friend on something. So hopefully that, anyway, nothing specific is all I can say.
Well, that all sounds great and Godspeed on your future projects. And yeah, thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. Us meaning me and my extremely intrusive cat
I
interrupting
loved
this
I loved
entire.
I loved the kitties. It was so nice to talk to them. No, it was so nice to be back. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate your
No
questions.
problem. You're very welcome. Okay, listeners, please check out Second Shift. By the time that you hear this, it'll be out in the world. So you can head to your favorite bookstore, comic book store, library. Do you have a place you like to send folks for books?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I no, I don't.
Okay.
The library. The library,
Library.
absolutely.
Yeah, libraries. Go to library twice. Okay. All right. Thank you all once again. It is now time to close this chapter.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.